Coming to get you, Bobber.
Dead End is a 2003 horror movie directed by Jean-Baptiste Andrea and Fabrice Canepa, and it stars Ray Wise, Lin Shaye and Alexandra Holden. Welcome back to my Christmas movie review, guys, and remember, because these are old movies, this is going to be a spoiler review. Christmas Eve, on his way to his in-laws with his family, Frank decides to try a shortcut for the first time in 20 years. It turns out to be the biggest mistake of his life. Before we get into the review, I'm going to take a trip down memory lane because I've seen this movie a few times now. But the very first time I seen it was on DVD, but I put the DVD into my laptop, and I'll try and make this as short as possible. But I remember watching this in the dark on my laptop with my earphones in. I was still living with my parents at the time. I was only like 19 or something, and I put the DVD in. And it's not a very scary film. You get a few frights because of how dark it is. But I had the earphones in, and I always felt like there was something watching me as I was watching this, because the light was shining in my eyes and everything else was pitch black. And because I had the earphones in, I couldn't hear anything either. And lo and behold, because I'm from the UK, my mum tapped me on the shoulder, and I got the biggest fright ever. She's like, "Do you want a cup of tea?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm watching a horror movie with my earphones in. You gave me a big fright." But that was just, it's a memory that I always remember. Anytime I put Dead End on, I always remember the first time I watched it and I shat myself. I did mention that I watched it on DVD, and that's where I saw it, DVD, because I didn't go and see it in the cinema. It had their limited release in the cinema in the UK. I'm not sure about worldwide, but I just think that it came and went without a whimper, or with a whimper. And it didn't make much at the box office, but I did read that it made $77 million in DVD sales. I don't know if that was, in total up until today or back then, but $77 million is a lot of money for a low budget horror movie, especially one that didn't make a lot in the cinema.
Oh, damn.
Was there no dial tone?
No, Laura, I just forgot the number for 911.
The dialogue was incredible. The acting was fantastic, and I mean by everybody. Now, I think obviously the dialogue helps because some of the acting's not the best acting I've ever seen, but the acting was great. The family dynamic with these four characters, there's obviously 5 or 6 characters in this film, but the 4 main characters is the mum and dad, the son and daughter, and the interactions they have with each other throughout this film is so genuine and realistic. This is maybe not the words that they say, but this is the type of interaction I've had with my family growing up. And it's the type of interaction I have with my current family, with my 2 kids. Obviously, we're not full-mouthed to each other, but the fun and the jokes that they have with each other, even in times of need, is quite witty, and that's what happens in this film. Every character is lovable, every character is realistic and dynamic, and I love that part of the film.
What is that?
It's a baby carriage.
I can see it's a baby carriage.
And like I said, that's all thanks to the dialogue, because the dialogue is so witty. There's some really funny moments. Although this is a horror movie, it's like a dark comedy horror, like a black comedy horror, but the dialogue in it is great. The dialogue, every time there's a joke, it's said at a time where you're not expecting it, but it's also said at a time where you're willing to laugh and get on board with the characters because of how funny they are. I think the dialogue was great and the acting was great as well.
Maybe the North Star doesn't indicate north. Maybe the map maker was drunk. Maybe the moon's made out of cheese. Who knows?
When it comes to the cinematography, there's not much to look at because they're just on the road and they're mainly in the car with some outdoor shots. But one thing that I do like about this is the bird's eye view shots, the overhead shots, because we do see that from time to time throughout the movie, and it just shows how isolated they are. You know, I love my isolated horror movies, but because they're enclosed in this car, we don't know how isolated they are. Because they're on the open road, you don't tend to think, oh, they're isolated because they're on the open road, but you see from a bird's eye point of view how isolated they are on this road to nowhere, basically going nowhere. We've got the lady in white. Now, I think the lady in white was like a semi-urban legend, because you hear of car crashes, for example, and there's one survivor, and they're hitchhiking to try and get help. you take them in the car and it turns out they're dead as well, they died in the crash. That's the type of person that the lady in white came across as throughout the film. She was very mysterious, and she was probably the scariest part of the movie, and I think it's because we don't know anything about her. We obviously find out what happens at the end, which I'll go into, but at this moment in time when we see the lady in white introduced, we're like, whoa, who is she? Now this is a major spoiler part because I'm going to talk about what actually happens and what the story is about. And basically the story is about this family that are in a car crash with another family, the lady in white and her baby, and as they crash into each other they all die, apart from one person who's semi-conscious, and her semi-consciousness is the movie of everybody getting picked off one by one. They're all dying, not because they're getting killed by people, but because they're dying in the hospital. So that's basically what the premise of the movie is about, but it doesn't let on throughout the whole film. Now I'll be honest, you might know yourself what happens from the very beginning, but I didn't latch on, and I think it's because of the dialogue and the story. I think the way they wrote the story, they took us away from the thought of any notion of them being dead, because they talk about people being dead, they talk about their theories on what's happening. Are they on a military road, for example? They completely make the viewer forget to think about what is actually happening, because all the way through the movie when I first seen it, I was thinking, what kind of road is this? Is it like a Twilight Zone road? Where are they going? What's happening? Who's this lady in white? At no point in this film did I think they were dead or dying. So I think that's something that I loved about the story, because the story was so tightly knit that I never even had an idea they were actually dead. I did mention about my theories about a lady in white because of the urban legends that I've read about before, but then the main character, Frank, he talks about his experiences with a lady in white as well.
Miraculously, they didn't go over the cliff, and when they turned to look at the back seat, the little girl had vanished.
Near the end of the film, we do start to put the pieces together and think, oh wait a minute, it seems like they are dead, because you've got the main girl who sees her family laid out in the ground with body bags, and I'm like, right, okay, there's this hearse looking car that's taking all the bodies are getting picked off one by one, and everything's so mysterious. What is actually happening here? But you do start to piece it together before the very end, and there's the road they're on is Marcotte, for example. That's the name of the nurse who's treating them, who's trying to keep them alive, and obviously the main girl's trying to keep her alive as well. And then you've got the hearse driver, well, it's not really a hearse, I think it's a Cadillac that he drives. He loves classic cars. So it's all pieced together with her memory of what she can see, and so she's kind of in and out of consciousness. But wait, were they really just in and out of consciousness? Were they really dying in a hospital? We just don't know now, because there was a scene at the very end where, well, before the very end, Frank was writing things that he wants to do before he dies, and that was, from what we assume, as part of the girl's dream, her consciousness coming in and out. So that none of that really happened. He was just dying in hospital. But then the roadside sweepers at the end of the film are sweeping up the crash, and then they find a note that was from Frank, who wrote that. So did he actually experience that? Were they really on the road? And was the lady in white really a real person? Or should I say, was the lady in white a real story? I didn't feel any ambiguity at the end of the film at all because of how it fed us throughout the movie, but because the roadside sweepers had that letter, then that did all of a sudden leave this movie ambiguous. Did it really happen, or was it just a dream? Because of that note, we just don't know now, and that's what I love about this film. Overall, guys, I think this movie was extremely funny, and it was funny in the right way. I think it was quite scary, not extremely scary, but there was some scary moments with the lady in white, for example, creeping up on you from behind you. The sort of things that you would, when you're out on the road and you're scared, that's the type of things that you feel when you're watching this film, because we don't know what's happening. We don't know if they're just seeing things, we don't know if it's a dream, etc, etc. So it was scary because we didn't know what was happening, but what I loved about this most was the acting and the dialogue. I think the dialogue and the acting was what made this movie for me.
I'm not getting back in that car.
Me neither.
If you've seen this movie, guys, leave your comments down below, let me know what you thought of it, and did you see that ending coming? As always, thanks a lot for watching, thanks for subscribing, I'll see you soon, bye bye.